Welcome to Retirement GPS, navigated by Synergy, your roadmap to a secure and confident retirement. Each week, we explore strategies, stories, and planning frameworks designed to help you navigate the complexities of life after work. From tax planning to investments, income strategies to risk management, our goal is to give you the clarity and confidence you need to make informed decisions. But retirement isn't just about the numbers. It's also about lifestyle, purpose, and peace of mind. We're here to guide you through both the financial details and the personal dimensions of this next chapter. Let's chart today's course.
Welcome back. This is episode 16 of the Retirement GPS podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Zaharchek, founder and president of Synergy Retirement Planning, and I'm here with my associate planner, Zane Belsack. Hey, Zane. How you doing today?
I'm good, Ryan. I'm good. How are you?
Great. We're going to focus on our Social Security strategy and how we think about Social Security, because most people have a very clear-cut way of thinking about Social Security. I'm eligible, I'm going to start collecting when I can, and I'm going to get my money. And that's fine, because those are all effectively true. But the question is, are you making a mistake in collecting Social Security if you're not being intentional about how you think it through, if you're not planning, if you're not learning about it? So we're going to talk a little bit about Social Security today, how to think about it, and what are some of the important variables that should affect your decision on when do I collect, because it is a question that we get all the time. In fact, we recently had two people into the office, Alex and Beth, who had questions about Social Security, and they were just wondering when they should take it, and they really had a pretty strong opinion that they wanted to take it as early as possible. Alex was still working, but he was 63 years old. Beth was 61, and they were planning to retire next year, so for them, it was, let's claim early, let's get as much as we can, and let's just make sure that we're getting our free benefit, because you never know what tomorrow brings and that we could die 2 years after we retire. And of course, they're absolutely right. We laid out the trade-offs, claiming as early as retirement versus waiting until full retirement age to get their standard benefit. And then, of course, they could even delay until age 70. They really started to understand how it impacted them, how it impacted their future, and making the right decision for them. And that's really what was important. And it's not really about trying to get, quote unquote, the government, even though we all feel that way sometimes. We want to get our money back. But it's really about laying out things like your cash flow. What does your health look like? What is the economic situation that we're living in? Are you going to be earning any money part-time? Making sure that we understand all of these components and how it plays in together as spouses so that we can make a good decision for Social Security and make sure that we've got a plan in place that's going to do the best that we can to maximize Social Security.
And full retirement age is 67, correct?
Good question. For a lot of people, it's 67, but not for everybody. So full retirement age is effectively the original age of Social Security, which is the age that you're able to collect your Social Security benefits when it was first started in the 1930s. They've come up with a little bit more of some sophisticated structures so that you can collect it early or you can collect it later, and your benefits were either going to be penalized if you collect it early or grow if you collect it later. But full retirement age for our purposes is anywhere from age 65 to 67. In the 1990s, it used to be 65 for everybody, and that was the same age that Medicare kicked in. But in the 1990s, Bill Clinton changed the law, and what they did is they had to push back the full retirement age for Social Security to try to keep it solvent to make sure that they had enough money to pay the benefits. So they gradually pushed it back from 65 to 67. Now, anybody born 1960 or later has a full retirement age of 67. And if you were born before 1960, then you actually are going to have a full retirement age somewhere between age 65 and 67.
And didn't they, or at least weren't they thinking about doing that again, pushing the Social Security age back even more?
Yeah, that's always an option on the table. They've had financial problems with Social Security. The fundamental issue that has to be addressed is that people are living longer, right? So when Social Security first came into play during the Great Depression in the 1930s, it was designed that the life expectancy was 58 years old, and Social Security kicked in at 62, I think was the age. Don't quote me on that. But it was basically the age of Social Security started after life expectancy. Today, the average life expectancy is somewhere in the mid-70s, and we're paying benefits starting at full retirement age, which is 65 to 67. So really, Social Security ages have not kept up with life expectancy. It's not really designed, it wasn't really designed as a retirement insurance program, even though that's what it's called. It was really designed as more of an old age program to keep people who were living much, much older. This was in a time where our economy was far more industrial, where today it's far more knowledge work. So people are living much longer due to medical technology and better living and better lifestyles. And that really wasn't thought through at the time. So they are pushing it back to try to continue to keep it solvent. But there's no plan in place today to push it back any further.
I would say it's mostly based on age, and I've heard this a lot, not the rumor that the Social Security Administration is going bankrupt. I'm sure you've heard that too, Ryan.
The truth is, they're not going bankrupt. It is a federal program. So as long as the federal government is still around, they will have funding for Social Security. But Social Security was supposed to be a pay-in and pay-out system, which is money goes in, and then benefits are then paid out from the money that was paid in. And the logic being based on the population and the aging of the population, that far more people are going to be collecting Social Security than in the past. It used to be something like 6 people were working and paying into Social Security for every 1 person collecting. Now I think we're down to about 2 to 1, maybe about 1.5 to 1, and that number is getting less and less. So the concern is effectively that the Social Security war chest, the money that has been collected all these years from Social Security benefits, will effectively run out. It's not a great concern of mine because my personal opinion is this is one of the most important programs for seniors. Seniors are the highest voting population when it comes to voter turnout. ARP is very powerful. If they put out the word that a politician is talking about cutting or eliminating Social Security benefits in any way, shape, or form, or that the government's not going to continue to fund it, i.e. if the money runs out, the government can just fund it out of general expenses. So they have the ability to continue with Social Security benefits, and then voters will certainly continue to vote for it, especially older people who are reliant on that money to live. It's really important that it continues. There's a good chance that younger people your age, Zane, are looking at the rules today, and the rules will be different. The rules are different today than they were when I started working, simply because they pushed back retirement age. And I'm pretty comfortable with that. I'm okay with that. I don't mind if I'm in my 20s or my 30s, even in my 50s, and I was expecting it at age 67 and now the age of 68 or 69. I can live with that. But I can tell you right now, an 80-year-old who's living on Social Security can't live with a 30% cut in benefits. So I personally don't see that anybody who is currently collecting, I really think anybody over 60 is pretty comfortable with what they can expect. Anybody below 60, it is a bit of a crapshoot. There may be a delayed benefit, there may be a cut in benefits, and that certainly may be coming down the pike. But I wouldn't worry about that if you're already collecting or very close.
And I understand that. I do like more money. That's the thing. If
Who
they
doesn't?
keep pushing back my retirement age.
Yep, everybody likes more money, that's for sure. And that's why I always tell people, if you are under 50 years old and you're looking at Social Security, use it as a guide, not as a hard and fast rule. There's no guarantee that when you get to your retirement age, that is exactly how the program's going to work. It will most likely change, and I'm expecting it will. I'm 49 as of this recording, and I fully expect that by the time I get to my benefit age, that the program will have changed slightly. Hopefully not a ton, but slightly, and I expect that. So let's talk a little bit about Social Security and how it works. We've alluded to the fact that basically you're eligible to collect Social Security retirement benefits between the ages of 62 and 70. You need to have paid into Social Security for 40 quarters of work, which means you need to have worked on the books where you're paying in government programs, FICA, your FICA tax on your paycheck, for effectively 10 years, which is 40 quarters. So 10 years over the course of your life. Now, if you've done that, you're eligible for your own Social Security benefits. That's fantastic. If you don't reach those 10 years, then you'll not be eligible. You may be eligible if you're a spouse. So this is what satisfies the sort of stay-at-home mom problem, where you have a mother who never was in the workforce and stayed home and raised a family, which is, of course, the hardest job there is out there. They actually would not be eligible for their own benefit, but they are eligible for 50% of their spouse's benefit. So if your spouse is out there working, so you stay home and raise the family, you're eligible for 50% of their benefit. They get their full benefit, you get half of that. Okay, so there is a benefit eligible if you're married and you don't have your own benefit. The way Social Security is calculated is effectively it takes 35 years of your working life, and it calculates your benefit based off of the income that you earned during those 35 years. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's say that you don't work 35 years. Let's say you were a stay-at-home mom, but you only did it for 15 years while your kids were young, and then you went back into the workforce. So you actually worked for, let's say 20 years. You worked for 20 years, but you haven't worked for the full 35. Now, clearly you're eligible for Social Security because you completed your 40 quarters, but you haven't filled 35 years to fill each year's bucket. And what happens is the 15 years that you didn't work, they're all just going to be marked as zero. And what they do is they take an average. So they'll look at the earnings that you had when you first started your career, and they adjust all those earnings to inflation. So all past earnings are adjusted. Any years you didn't work, zeros are built into those years. And they average that out to come up with your primary insurance amount. When you get your primary insurance amount, they then calculate your benefit off of that number. So one way to help yourself, if you are concerned about what your Social Security benefit is, replacing zeros, right? So if you don't work for 35 years, or you're not planning to work for 35 years, and you say, well, I'm not sure, maybe I'll work 1 year, another year, maybe 2 more before I retire, before I collect my benefits. By replacing 0 years with earning years, you're going to dramatically increase your benefit because you're actually increasing your primary insurance amount by taking those zeros out. If you work part-time in retirement, even if you are collecting benefits, if I'm 70 years old and I'm collecting benefits, but I still don't have 35 years, that part-time work is replacing zeros, which will also increase your benefit the next year, which is fantastic. So understanding how your Social Security is calculated can help you decide what are the right strategies to maximize that benefit. Now, your full retirement age, we're going to just assume that people listening to this podcast, your full retirement age is 67. You can collect as early as 62. If you collect as early as 62, you will take a penalty. That can be as much as 40% of your benefit. And every month that you work past age 62, or every year I should say that you don't collect past age 62, your benefit will increase as you get closer to your full retirement age. That penalty can be pretty painful, though, especially later in life. And we'll talk about that in the future. But understanding that you will be getting that penalty. And what I mean by that is if I were going to collect $3,000 a month at full retirement age, if I collected 62 and I get a 40% penalty on that 3,000, I'm collecting significantly less. In fact, I'm collecting $1,200 less per month. So now I'm only collecting $1,800 instead of my full 3,000. It's a pretty big penalty for that period of time. We're talking 5 years. Now, if I keep delaying past full retirement age, I can continue to do that until I reach age 70. At age 70, I can keep delaying past age 70. We just don't ever recommend it. It's not a good idea because at age 70, the benefit stops accruing, right? It stops growing. I get a 9% increase every single year that I don't collect Social Security past my full retirement age until I reach age 70. That's a pretty big increase, especially when we're talking about rates of return out in the world. Obviously, this is not pure rates of return because we're not keeping the money. It's also based on life expectancy, which is now 1 year shorter if I'm collecting a year later. 9% is a pretty nice increase that we're going to be looking at until we reach age 70. Don't ever wait till later than age 70 because past that, there is no increased benefit. In fact, if you apply at age 71, which is a year past the age 70 max, you'll actually get all your back pay for the year that you should have been collecting. Social Security doesn't really let you fail on that part, but you definitely want to collect by age 70. So that's really how things work, and we want to make sure that you understand that before we start talking about any real strategy here and what to think about. The other thing to consider is Social Security. We like to call it really, I think it's the best source of income we can have in retirement. And why do I say that? Number one, it's guaranteed by the federal government. There is no other sources of income I know of, unless you're on a government pension, that are guaranteed by the federal government. The government has the keys to the printing press. Like I said, if money does run out for Social Security, they can just print more money. Anything guaranteed by the government is the safest we have in this world. Second, there is what's called a COLA, cost of living adjustment. Each year, the benefit increases with what we would call inflation. And the inflation number is calculated based off of last year's inflation, and they'll adjust your benefits up every single year, even if you're delaying. So inflation is included if you're delaying on top of the delay benefit. So that's something certainly to consider. And lastly, it is very tax efficient. Your Social Security benefits are probably the most tax efficient, maybe not the most tax efficient income, but one of the most tax efficient incomes we can get from income sources. Depending on what your income is, anywhere from 0 to 50 to 85% of our Social Security benefits will be taxed at our ordinary rate. Now, I say depending on because if our income is very low, we'll have zero tax. If our income is modest, we might pay tax on 50% of our benefits. But even if we're Warren Buffett, or probably a bad example because his income's not that high, but even if we're somebody who's very wealthy and has a high income, the most they will tax of your Social Security benefit is 85%, which means 15% of that benefit is tax-free. Once again, I don't know of any pensions or annuity payments or income sources in retirement that are guaranteed by the government and are at least a portion of them are tax-free. Really valuable. It's why we like to say the most that we can get out of these benefits, the better. Now, this is where the question comes in, is the break even, right? Zane, like the longevity, how long people live, that's really the problem.
And when exactly is the right time for me? 62, 67, 70, not past 70, but 70.
Yeah, exactly. We have a running joke in the office when people say, when do you think I should collect? Or what is the maximum that we can collect? When do we collect so we can collect the max? And I always tell people, okay, just write down the day you're going to die, and I'll do the math for you. And obviously nobody knows that. It's a joke. We don't know when you're going to die. You don't know when you're going to die. So we have to take the information that we have today to make the best decision that we can make about our Social Security benefits and when do we collect them. Now, let's talk about that information. What information do we have? First and foremost, the question is, what is our need? And this is always the first and foremost, because if we are in some way unable to work, right, just because we can't, and I'm not necessarily talking about a physical disability, but we are just unable to work, we can't find a job, and we're in Social Security range, which means we're 62 to 70, we may want to talk about collecting Social Security, no matter what the consequences are, because we got to put food on the table. So if there is a need there that we can't fill another way, then there's no question in my mind, all the other stuff we're talking about is academic. First and foremost is we got to be able to pay our bills. We got to put food on the table. So the need is first and foremost. Now, if we are working, if we are retired and we have other assets elsewhere, then the need isn't there. The question then is, we see Social Security as an asset just like any other asset. In fact, in a lot of cases, it's your most valuable asset, a stream of income that's adjusted to inflation, tax efficient, and guaranteed for the rest of your life. Seems like a pretty valuable asset to me. And when you take a present value calculation on that, you're looking at, for some people, in the millions of dollars. It's a really valuable asset. So we want to look at it really closely and say, when do we best want to leverage and use this asset? The things that we're going to look at to consider is, number one, your health. Right? What kind of health are you in? Because I can tell you, if you are in poor health, if you have a history of cancer, that you've had it once and or it keeps recurring, that's a pretty serious problem. If you have a history of heart disease, if you barely survived a heart attack, had a triple bypass, and then find out that your father and your grandfather both dropped dead of a heart attack in their late 50s or early 60s. These are all things that we take into account when we say, do we want to collect now? The probabilities, now we're in a different world, right? Your grandfather may have dropped dead in the 1950 at 50 years old. Your father may have dropped dead in 1980s, 1970s, 1980s at 50 years old. The medical technology, the way people lived back then was very different than people living today. In 100 years, our life expectancy is grown by 60%. So medical technology alone is growing at a fantastic rate that we can expect that we are going to live longer than our ancestors. We're going to pick up on genetic problems that we weren't able to pick up on before and fix them. This is something that we have to take into account. However, if we're continuing to have problems with our health, delaying Social Security does not seem like the right strategy for us. We probably want to talk about collecting it early. The next thing is economic issues. Right? If we decide that we're going to delay Social Security and we want to wait for that bigger benefit, and then all of a sudden we go through a major market correction, we go through a 2008, 2009 financial crisis again, now we may say, instead of drawing from our portfolio while it's down and we're still relatively young, maybe now is the time to turn on Social Security so we can take the pressure off of drawing from the portfolio in a really bad market environment. So economics is important. These are the three things that we want to think about in general as an overriding picture when we make that decision. Another thing that we want to think about, especially before full retirement age, so for those 62 to 67 that are eligible for Social Security, but again, going to do it in a way that will be penalized, is first and foremost, am I still working? If you're working and you're 64, your full retirement age is 67, and you're earning over $23,400 per year, you're going to get a reduction in your benefit for every dollar that you earn over $23,400. So if I happen to make $30,000 that year, I'm going to have a pretty significant reduction. In fact, it's 2 to 1. So I'm going to have a $1 reduction for every $2 I make. And at $23,400, that's $6,600 above the $23,400 threshold. and I'm going to have a penalty of $3,300 that I'm going to owe back at tax time, even if I collected it for Social Security. We want to be careful about that penalty. The penalty actually begins to go away the year that I turn 67, before I do, but the year I turn 67, if I earned within 12 months of turning 67, I have up to $62,160 to earn. And then the month I turn 67, that penalty disappears. So I can be a 68-year-old, I can work and make $1 million a year, and there's no penalty on my Social Security. So just understanding that rule can also help you decide when is the right time for me to collect. When we talk about penalties, a lot of people think, oh, that's horrible, like I lose all that money. The truth is you don't actually lose it. It just gets recalculated into your benefit later and spread out over time. So as an example, in the example I use at 64, if you did it for the 1 year, you made $30,000 and you have $6,600 over the threshold, you had a $3,300 penalty. Once you turn full retirement age at 67, they then take that $3,300 and they spread it out over your life expectancy. You might see an extra $8 a paycheck or something like that to be paid out over the rest of your life. So theoretically, you'd get it back. I say theoretically because we don't know how long you're going to live. You might get more back, you might get less back. So once we get that penalty, we would prefer not to have it because we really don't want to leave it to chance. If you accidentally had a penalty that you didn't realize, you're not going to lose all that money. It will come back to you to some degree.
For someone that works part-time, even for just a cash flow basis, if you're earning an income and it's satisfying your living expenses and your liabilities, why would you need to collect Social Security?
And that would be it. That would be the theme that we would push is if you have enough money coming in that you can satisfy your lifestyle, we should delay Social Security. That would be the goal, especially if we're working, whether it be part-time, full-time. And typically we recommend that even for people who are at full retirement age or past to say, hey, you're still working, you're still covering your expenses. Let's delay as long as, again, you're in good health. Obviously, you don't need the money because you're working. And economically, we're just assuming it's a decent economic environment because you're not pulling from your portfolio. We're not concerned about that. It's really your health. If you're in decent health and you're 67, 68, still working, earn enough money to live off of, delay. Next, I want to talk a little bit about spousal benefits, specifically for people that are married currently, people that are divorced, and for survivors, because this is where our strategies start to get complicated. To be honest with you, if you're an individual, single person, I don't care if you're a widow, widower, or you've just never been married, and you're looking to decide, hey, should I collect Social Security early? Should I collect it late? Should I collect it on time? The truth is we don't have the right answer for you because, like I said, we don't know when you're going to die. We may make some fair judgments based on various things that are going on, including all those variables that we talked about. But if we collected at 65, I don't know if that's the right decision for you. If you live to 90, it's a terrible decision. If you die at 75, it was a great decision. So the point is we don't exactly know when the right time to collect for you is. So if you're single, we're going to use a judgment based on those few variables. However, it gets very complex if you're married and if both you and your spouse are eligible for Social Security benefits. And let's talk about that. So we talked about the 50% spousal benefit, which means if one spouse is eligible for $3,000 in benefits and their second spouse either doesn't have any benefits or has much lower benefits because of their lower work history, they're going to have the choice of collecting their own benefit or 50% of their spouse's, whichever is higher, which is great because typically what we see is that the husband worked for 40 years. They have their full 35 years filled completely, and they might have a $4,000 annual benefit. And then the wife, even if she did have a career, maybe she was out of work for a while, maybe has 20 years, and has a $1,200 benefit. The good news is her $1,200 will be increased to $2,000 because it's 50% of her husband's. So that is something that's really important to consider. Now, if you're divorced, you're also eligible for a spousal benefit if you were married for at least 10 years before you were divorced, and you're currently unmarried. Now, the currently unmarried changes past 60. So if you do marry past 60, then you can certainly go claim on your former spouse's benefit if it's higher than your current spouse's. But you have to be over 60 when you get married. If you get married at 59, then you don't have that option. Now you're only limited to your current spouse's or your own benefit. But you'd have the same option. You'd be able to collect 50% of your divorced spouse's when the time comes. The problem is you don't know. You're not going to know what their benefit is. We actually have people that have gone through this and literally had to wait until they collect to find out what the benefit is going to be. You can't really plan in advance, which makes it a little tricky.
Does that affect the ex-spouse, the person whose benefit it is?
No, it never does. Nope, spousal benefits never affect the original person's benefit. So if that person had a $4,000 benefit, they're still having a $4,000 benefit. You're just going to be able to get $2,000 benefit off of that spouse. It doesn't mean their $4,000 goes down to $2,000. It just means you were a spouse and you're eligible for that 50. And then, of course, we have survivor benefits. So widower may receive benefit based on their deceased spouse record. They can actually collect even earlier than 62, as early as age 60, but it is further reduced, so we are careful about that. However, a lot of times we actually recommend, and it's a little bit of a trick that is not available to spouses, but a widow's benefit, you can collect the widow benefit off of your deceased spouse at age 60 and then switch to your own personal benefit when you reach full retirement age. So you're actually able to collect the entire time without taking a reduction when you collect your own. And that can be really valuable. So those are the things that we want to consider. When we're thinking about strategy, especially with a married couple, typically what we see is one spouse of the other has a higher benefit. Now, in a lot of cases, it's the husband. In a lot of cases, it's the wife. Doesn't really matter. What matters is that if one spouse has a higher benefit and the other one has a lower benefit, and we call it a reduced benefit, we want to work those two benefits. And let me explain why. Because when it comes to a surviving spouse, let's say in our last example, one spouse had $4,000 a month in benefit. The second spouse had $2,000 a month in benefit. If the spouse with the higher benefit passes away early, let's say 72, and then the spouse with the lower benefit lives to 95, as soon as the spouse passes away, the $4,000 benefit now becomes the second spouse's benefit. The $2,000 drops off, i.e. the lower benefit always drops off when one spouse passes away, and now that $4,000 benefit lives on, and it lives on as long as the second spouse does. So the higher benefit of the two actually stays with whoever lives the longest. This is a really important key to Social Security, something that Social Security hasn't actually taken into account at all. When you apply for a pension, if you ever received a pension or if you're eligible for a pension, you might see that they have a couple of options, right? They have a joint spouse with a 100% benefit, a joint spouse with a 75% benefit or a 50% benefit, and all of those reduce the benefit of the original benefit of the original worker. In Social Security, that doesn't happen, right? You get your full benefit regardless of whether you have a spouse or not. And specifically, if you have a younger spouse who has a lower benefit, then there is a very high probability that younger spouse, that one of the two spouses are going to live longer than the break-even point to benefit from that much, much higher benefit. So what we want to look at from a strategy standpoint is we like to say, if there's one spouse with a higher benefit, we like to delay their benefit as long as practical. And I say not as possible because we know how long possible is age 70, but as long as practical, which means if I'm still working at 68, yeah, I'd like to collect Social Security because it'd be extra cash in my pocket. I could either invest it or take more vacations. But we say, no, try to delay it. Try to delay that benefit until age 70. In fact, in a lot of cases, we actually have people living off of their own investments and delaying their benefit, the higher spouse's benefit until age 70. Then at age 70, they'll collect the full bigger benefit. So maybe it's not $4,000 anymore. Now it's $5,500. And as I discussed, that $5,500 is living with either spouse, whoever lives the longest. We also want the spouse with the smaller benefit to collect at full retirement age, okay? We don't want them collecting early, not at 62, not at 63, not at 64, full retirement age, which for most people is age 67, because that is the benefit that's going to drop off first. Whichever spouse dies first, that benefit's going to drop off. If the lower benefit spouse lives the longest, they're going to get the much higher benefit from the spouse that delayed to 70. So the probability state, we're going to do much, much better with this type of strategy. Like I said, there's a lot of variables that go into that. We want to make sure everybody's healthy. We want to make sure that they have assets and they can put food on the table. All of these other things, of course, aren't affected by this strategy. We still need to look at them. But this strategy can be really powerful in trying to maximize spousal benefits when it comes to working with two spouses together. We don't want the spouse with a lower benefit to collect early, even at age 62, thinking, oh, but that benefit's going to be reduced. It's going to be eliminated as soon as the first one dies. Let's collect it as soon as possible, because that penalty that they take by collecting at 62 carries through to the higher benefit. So if I'm the spouse with the smaller benefit, instead of collecting at 67, I collected at 62, I get a 40% reduction in benefit. Then if my spouse dies and I get the bigger benefit, it's the bigger benefit minus 40%. So we're shooting our strategy in the foot by trying to collect at age 62. You have to be really careful in thinking these things through when coming up with a framework of what we want.
I'm assuming that these carryovers don't apply to ex-spouses, correct? Having the higher benefit move down and the penalties.
No, great question. They do not. This is only for existing spouses. When it comes to ex-spouses, if your ex-spouse were to pass away, you're still able to collect your benefit, but you're not going to get their higher benefit. A couple of things we want to make sure that you avoid when claiming Social Security, most of which we've already talked about. Number one is claiming early purely due to your skepticism of Social Security being around later. I think it's a mistake. I think you really need to think about your strategy and expect that Social Security will be there for you, especially if you're already in your 60s. I do not think you're going to see a change in benefits in your lifetime. So my suggestion to you is make the determination that's right for you, not because you're afraid. Make sure you're not ignoring the earnings test. So if you are continuing to work and you're below 67 and thinking about collecting, be very careful. Make sure that you're not going to earn above the thresholds that would penalize you in the future. Overlooking survivor implications if you're a couple, right? What is the implication of me either collecting early or not delaying as late as possible? And how does that affect my spouse down the road? So that's really important. And then lastly, something that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, but managing cash flow with Social Security related to it to protect against both taxes, but also IRMAA. So IRMAA is the increase in our Medicare premiums. If we are 65 and older and collecting, Medicare Part B has premiums associated with it. And if we are in higher income tax brackets, for a married couple, it's $212,000 for 2025. If we make more than that, we may have an IRMAA plus up. We may have an increase in our Medicare premiums simply because we earned too much this year. And by not being careful and really structured in our Social Security strategy, we could inadvertently trigger these IRMAAs, which is effectively a tax on our money. So our decision framework, think about what is your health and longevity? Are you in pretty good health? Do you expect that you're going to have a longer life or a shorter life? What are your cash needs now? Are you able to cover your essentials? Are you able to cover your costs? What's your work status? Are you continuing to work? Think about the earnings test. If you're debating collecting early, marital status. How does my decision today affect my spouse? If you are married and you're both going to be getting Social Security benefits, which you both should be, always you should be making decisions together in how is your Social Security strategy going to work together, not independently. Tax view. So how is this going to affect things like Roth conversions that I might be doing? How is it going to affect my tax brackets? How is it going to affect my IRMAAs? And make sure that you're starting today. Make sure that you're looking at, even if you're on the younger side, go log into ssa.gov. Get a copy of your Social Security report. See what you're entitled to. And start to think about what is the right strategy for me. And ultimately, as we always say, these things can be complicated. These are complicated strategies we're talking about. Talk to a financial professional who understands them and can help talk you through the best Social Security strategy. If you ask your advisor, what do you think is a good Social Security strategy for us? And they say, oh, it doesn't really matter. Then you're with the wrong advisor. Sit down with somebody who knows what they're talking about. Folks, this was a great conversation. It was a great opportunity for us to discuss Social Security. If you liked what you heard, make sure you follow us. Make sure that you subscribe to our podcast. Like us, pound that like button. That really helps us, and it gets more people learning about these great topics. Zane, anything to add?
I would say turn on your post notifications. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. So
remember, guys, make sure that you keep learning and keep planning. Till next time.
Thank you for listening to Retirement GPS, navigated by Synergy. To explore today's topic further, visit our blog mile markers at synergyretirement.com/blog, where we offer detailed strategies, examples, and downloadable tools to support your retirement journey. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Synergy Retirement Planning for weekly insights, checklists, and planning reminders. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share it with someone planning for their future. Until next time, keep navigating toward a confident retirement. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as investment, legal, or tax advice. Listeners should consult their own financial, tax, and legal advisors before making any decisions. Synergy Retirement Planning is a registered investment advisor located in Red Bank, New Jersey.